Kane Mitchell stood in the massive hall of the Galactic Council building. Around him, creatures from 47 different worlds argued about trade routes and mining rights. The noise was terrible. Clicking sounds from the insect-like Zephyrians, mixed with the deep rumbles of the rock-shaped crystallines. The snake-like hegemony members hissed their words, while the blue-skinned Altarians spoke in their musical language. Kane had been the human ambassador for 15 years. He was tired of listening to these debates, where humans were always treated like servants. Today felt different, though. His pocket held a small message device that had arrived that morning from Earth. The message was only 3 words long, but those words would change everything. The message said, "Operation Silent begins." Kane kept his face blank. He had trained for this moment his whole life. Around him, the other ambassadors continued their endless talking. None of them noticed when Kane quietly stood up and walked toward the exit. He had served in this building for so long that the guards barely looked at him anymore. Outside the council building, Kane climbed into a small transport ship. He punched in coordinates for the human quarter of the space station. As he flew through the busy traffic lanes, he watched the normal life of the galaxy continue around him. Cargo ships moved between the massive towers. Alien families walked through the shopping districts. None of them knew that everything was about to change. Back on Earth, Dr. Lisa Parker was already 3 hours into the biggest evacuation in human history. She sat in the command center, deep under the mountains of Colorado. Hundreds of screens showed human colonies across the galaxy. Green lights meant the evacuation was going well. Red lights meant trouble. Lisa had helped plan this day for 20 years. The plan was called Operation Silent because no one would announce what was happening. No warnings would be given. No explanations would be offered. Humanity would simply disappear. The first ships had launched from the outer colonies 6 hours ago. Captain Ryan Hayes commanded the largest evacuation fleet in human space. His ships looked like normal cargo vessels from the outside, but inside, they carried entire families and all their belongings. Ryan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the status reports come in. Colony 7 had finished loading their people. Colony 12 was having problems with their power systems, but it would be ready soon. The mining station at Kepler 442 had already gone dark. Their people were safely aboard evacuation ships, heading for the jump point. Ryan had fought in 3 wars for the Galactic Council. He had saved alien worlds from pirates and disasters. He had trained alien soldiers and shared human military knowledge freely. The thanks he got was being told that humans were too young and violent to have real power in the galaxy. Today, the galaxy would learn what it meant to lose human help. On Luna Station, Commander Jack Turner was destroying everything humans had built in this solar system. His teams worked quickly and quietly. The quantum computers that ran half the galaxy's communication systems were being reduced to melted metal. The research labs where humans had developed new medicines were being emptied, and then blown up. Jack watched his people work with pride. They were not stealing anything. They were not taking revenge. They were simply removing every trace of human knowledge and technology from council space. If the aliens wanted to run the galaxy without humans, they could try to do it without human tools too. The hardest part was watching 30 years of scientific work disappear. The medical databases that could cure diseases across dozens of species were being wiped clean. The agricultural systems that had doubled food production on 40 worlds were being shut down. The defense networks that protected the Council's core worlds were having their human-designed components removed. Dr. Amanda Foster supervised the destruction of the genetics laboratory on Luna. She had spent her entire career developing new crops that could grow on alien worlds. Her work had fed billions of creatures across the galaxy. Now she was making sure that work would disappear with humanity. Amanda felt sad as she watched her life's work being destroyed, but she also felt angry. The council had never given her credit for her discoveries. Alien scientists had put their names on her research papers. When she asked for better funding, she was told that humans should be grateful just to participate in galactic science. The council thought humans were useful pets who would always be there to fix their problems. Today they would learn they were wrong. On the merchant world of Nexus 7, human traders were quietly closing their businesses. Bill Morgan had run a shipping company there for 12 years. His human crews had moved cargo to every corner of the galaxy. They had never failed to deliver on time, even when it meant flying through war zones or dangerous space storms. Bill's ships were now loading up with human families instead of cargo. His employees thought they were just taking a vacation back to human space. They did not know they would never be coming back. The aliens who worked with Bill thought he was just taking a short break. A crystalline factory owner who depended on Bill's ships to move his products was not worried. The Zephyrian mining company that shipped their ore through Bill's network assumed the humans would be back in a few weeks. None of them understood that this was goodbye forever. At the council military academy on Rigel Prime, human instructors were packing their belongings. Colonel Steve Brooks had trained alien officers for 8 years. He had taught them everything humans knew about space warfare, tactics, and military technology. Steve's students respected him, but their governments treated him like hired help. Human military advisors were not allowed to hold high ranks in alien armies. Human tactical knowledge was used to win battles, but humans were never invited to plan the wars. Steve left behind training manuals and equipment, but he took something more important with him. He carried the access codes to every military system humans had helped build. Without those codes, the aliens would find their weapons and defenses slowly breaking down. As the last day of human presence in Council space continued, the evacuation picked up speed. Entire human colonies were disappearing within hours. Space traffic control systems started showing empty zones where human ships used to travel regularly. Kane Mitchell returned to the council chambers one final time. The afternoon session was starting, and the alien representatives were arguing about the same boring trade disputes as always. Kane walked to his seat and placed a small data pad on his desk. The data pad contained humanity's formal withdrawal from every treaty, agreement, and alliance they had signed with the Council. It also contained the resignation of every human from every job they held in Council space. Kane stood up and walked toward the exit. A few aliens noticed him leaving early, but most were too busy arguing to care. Kane had attended thousands of these meetings over the years. The aliens probably thought he was just bored again. Kane reached the main exit of the council building and stopped. He turned around and looked back at the Great Hall one last time. In a few hours, these creatures would realize that humanity was gone. In a few days, they would start to understand what that meant. Kane had no regrets. The council had made their choice long ago when they decided that humans were useful, but not important. Today, humanity was making their choice too. Kane walked out of the building and headed for his ship. Behind him, the council continued their endless debates, unaware that their galaxy had just changed forever. The humans were leaving, and they were taking their knowledge, their skills, and their help. With them, the age of human service to the galaxy was over. What came next would be up to the aliens to figure out on their own. 3 months had passed since the last human ship left Council space. General Vex Thai of the Zephyrian Empire stood in his command center, watching red warning lights flash across every screen. His insect-like eyes moved quickly between the displays, trying to understand what was happening to his military forces. The defense systems protecting the Zephyrian homeworld had been failing for weeks. At first, his engineers thought it was normal wear and tear. Now they knew better. Every major weapons platform, every shield generator, every early warning system depended on quantum processors that humans had installed years ago. Without human technicians to update the software and replace worn parts, the systems were breaking down one by one. 3 orbital defense stations had already gone completely dark. The main planetary shield was running at 30% power and dropping. Every day, Lexthai tried calling the human embassy, but found only empty offices. He tried sending messages to human colonies, but received no replies. It was as if humanity had vanished from the galaxy completely. On the other side of Council Space, President Kolanar of the Altarian Federation was dealing with his own crisis. The blue-skinned leader stood in his agricultural command center watching food production numbers that made no sense. The farming worlds that fed his people were reporting massive crop failures. The automated systems that had doubled their harvests for decades were shutting down without explanation. The soil processors that could turn dead dirt into rich farmland had stopped working entirely. Dr. Ziltam, his chief agricultural scientist, approached with another bad report. "Sir, we have lost contact with the farming systems on 12 more worlds. The AI networks that control planting and harvesting are going offline faster than we can restart them." Kolinar felt cold fear in his chest. His people needed those farms to survive. The Altarian population had grown enormous over the past century because human farming technology had made food so plentiful. Now that abundance was disappearing, and millions faced starvation, far away in the Andromeda approach, President Maria Santos sat in her new office on the human colony world of New Haven. Through her window, she could see the city's humanity had been secretly building for 50 years. Clean energy plants powered by fusion reactors that were decades ahead of anything the Council had ever seen. Farms that used advanced genetics to grow food in any environment. Factories that could build anything humans needed. Maria was reading intelligence reports from the galaxy they had left behind. Her spy networks, hidden deep in alien governments, were sending back detailed information about the chaos spreading through Council Space. The reports painted a picture of civilizations that had grown completely dependent on human help without ever realizing it. Maria felt no sympathy for them. For centuries, humans had been treated like smart children who were useful for fixing problems, but too young to make important decisions. Admiral Ben Cooper commanded the human deep space monitoring stations that watched Council Space from a safe distance. His ships stayed hidden in empty regions between star systems, using sensors that were invisible to alien technology. Ben's teams intercepted thousands of desperate communications every day. Alien governments were trying to contact each other for help, but their own communication systems were failing. The quantum relay networks that carried messages between star systems had been built and maintained by human engineers. Without regular updates, the networks were losing synchronization and breaking apart. The hegemony of Scales had lost contact with 12 of their outer colonies when the communication relays in their territory went dark. The snake-like aliens were sending ships to check on their missing worlds, but many of those ships were getting lost because their navigation systems were also failing. Colonel Amy Brooks led the Human Intelligence Division from a secret base in the Magellanic Clouds. Her job was to monitor how badly alien civilizations were collapsing and report back to the human leadership. Amy's latest report was almost unbelievable. 40% of all interstellar shipping in the galaxy used navigation computers that humans had designed. Without software updates, those computers were making small errors that added up over long journeys. Ships were arriving at the wrong destinations or getting lost in space entirely. Medical facilities across alien worlds were struggling because they depended on medicines that humans had developed. The complex factories that made those medicines required constant adjustment and maintenance that only human biochemists understood. As the medicines ran out, diseases that had been controlled for generations were starting to spread again. Even the Council's own headquarters on Nexus Prime was having problems. The environmental systems that kept the air breathable and the temperature comfortable had been installed by human engineers 20 years ago. Without maintenance, the systems were breaking down, making the great council chambers uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous. The most shocking discovery came when the Kong Crystalline Collective tried to access their strategic military databases. The rock-like aliens found that all their most important information was locked behind encryption the humans had designed. The alien computer experts said it would take hundreds of years to break the codes, if it was even possible. Dr. Sam Rodriguez led humanity's scientific council from the research city of Einstein Station. His job was to make sure that human technology continued advancing while the alien world struggled with the collapse of their own systems. Sam received daily reports about alien attempts to reverse engineer human technology. The results were catastrophic. A Zephyrian team trying to copy human medical nanobots had accidentally created tiny robots that attacked healthy cells instead of diseased ones. The nanobots had escaped from the laboratory and killed every living thing in a 50-mile radius before finally breaking down. Crystalline engineers attempting to restart a human-designed shipyard had caused an explosion that destroyed half their orbital construction platform. They had tried to bypass the safety systems without understanding how they worked, turning the facility into a massive bomb. The worst incident happened when Altarian scientists tried to modify a human fusion reactor to produce more power. Their changes caused a chain reaction that destroyed an entire city and left a radioactive crater that would be dangerous for thousands of years. On the mining world of Kepler 438, the alien workforce was learning that their entire operation depended on human knowledge. The massive mining robots that could dig through solid rock had been designed by human engineers. Without replacement parts and software updates, the robots were breaking down faster than alien mechanics could fix them. Supervisor Grokhan of the Hegemony of Scales watched his mining operation fall apart. The ore processing plants that turned raw minerals into useful metals required precise chemical treatments that humans had developed. The alien chemists could follow the procedures they had been taught, but they did not understand the science. Behind them, when problems arose that were not covered in the instruction manuals, the alien workers had no idea how to solve them. Production dropped by 70% in just 2 months, and it was getting worse every day. Back on New Haven, Maria Santos called a meeting of the human leadership. The reports coming in from their former galaxy showed that the collapse was happening faster than even they had predicted. The aliens built their entire civilization on our knowledge and our work, Maria told the assembled leaders. They never bothered to learn how any of it actually worked. They just assumed we would always be there to maintain it for them. Admiral Cooper nodded grimly. Our monitoring stations are picking up military communications from the Council. Several member species are blaming each other for the crisis. The Zephyrians think the Crystallines are hoarding human technology. The Altarians are accusing the Hegemony of sabotage. Good, said Colonel Brooks. Let them fight among themselves. Maybe they will finally understand that their real problem was not respecting the people who made their comfortable lives possible. As the meeting ended, Maria looked out at the thriving human cities below. Humanity had not just survived their exodus from the galaxy. They had discovered what they could accomplish when they were free to work for themselves instead of for ungrateful masters. The aliens would learn to solve their own problems, or they would fall back into the primitive conditions their ancestors had known before humans arrived to help them. Either way, it was no longer humanity's concern. 6 months after humanity vanished, Chancellor Vex High of the Altarian Federation, called for an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. His blue skin had turned pale with stress, and his musical voice cracked with desperation as he spoke. To the assembled representatives, the great council chamber looked different now. Many seats sat empty because some species could no longer afford to send ambassadors. The environmental systems wheezed and struggled to keep the air clean. Emergency lighting flickered in sections where the main power grid had failed. We face the greatest crisis in galactic history, Vex High announced to the remaining delegates. Our agricultural worlds are experiencing widespread famine. Without human farming technology, our food production has dropped by 60%. Millions of my people are going hungry. Representative Grok Thane of the Hegemony of Scales hissed his agreement. The snake-like alien scales were dull and patchy, showing signs of malnutrition. The situation is even worse in our territory. We have lost contact with 18 colony worlds. Our ships cannot navigate properly without human guidance systems. We do not even know if those colonies still exist. From her hidden command center on New Haven, General Kate Stone monitored the council meeting through secret surveillance devices. Her agents had left behind. Kate had spent 15 years in alien space gathering intelligence for humanity. Now she watched her former enemies tear each other apart. The crystalline representative, a massive rock creature named Shard Ki, spoke in grinding tones that hurt to hear. The Zephyrians are hoarding technology in their territory. They refuse to share the few working human devices they still possess. This selfishness is making the crisis worse for everyone. General Zixstar of the Zephyrian Empire buzzed angrily, his insect wings creating a threatening sound. We are not hoarding anything. The truth is that none of us understand how human technology actually works. We followed their instructions, like trained pets, but we never learned the science behind their inventions. Kate almost smiled as she listened to the aliens argue. For centuries, they had treated humans like useful servants who could fix any problem. They had stolen human discoveries and put alien names on them. They had restricted human advancement while benefiting from human genius. Now they were learning the cost of their arrogance. On the research station orbiting New Haven, Dr. Sam Rodriguez reviewed the latest reports from his intelligence network. The technological collapse in Council. Space was accelerating beyond even his worst predictions. The fusion reactors that powered major cities were failing without proper maintenance. Human-designed. Containment systems required constant adjustments that alien engineers did not understand. 3 major population centers had already lost power completely, forcing millions of aliens to evacuate to other worlds. The faster-than-light communication networks were breaking down as quantum entanglement systems lost synchronization. Without these networks, the different species could barely coordinate their response to the crisis. Some regions of space had gone completely silent, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Basic manufacturing had stopped on dozens of worlds. The automated factories that produced everything from clothing to starship parts required human-designed control systems. When these systems failed, the aliens discovered they had forgotten how to make even simple items by hand. Back in the council chamber, the arguments were getting more heated. The Altarian Chancellor accused the hegemony of hiding functional human equipment. The crystalline representative claimed that the Zephyrians had driven the humans away with their military aggression. This is all pointless blame, interrupted Ambassador Velkan of the Traders Union, a small species that had built their economy on interstellar commerce. The real question is how we can contact the humans and convince them to return. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. For months, the council leaders had refused to admit that they needed human help. They had tried to solve their problems through alien science and alien cooperation. The idea of begging their former servants for assistance was humiliating. Chancellor Vex High finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We have tried to contact human space. Our messages go unanswered. Our scout ships find empty systems where human colonies used to be. It is as if they disappeared completely from the galaxy. What the aliens did not know was that humanity had, indeed, left their galaxy entirely. The secret colonization program had been building new homes in nearby galaxy clusters for 50 years. Human scout ships had found thousands of suitable worlds and had been preparing them for exactly this moment. Dr. Nancy White, humanity's chief medical officer, worked in her laboratory on the colony world of New Eden. She was developing treatments for diseases that had never existed before, illnesses that could only affect the enhanced human physiology that had evolved during their time in space. Nancy also received reports about medical disasters in council space. The sophisticated treatment systems that had kept alien populations healthy were failing without human-developed medicines. Diseases that had been eliminated centuries ago were returning with deadly results. The Zephyrian Empire was dealing with a plague that attacked their respiratory systems. The medicine that could cure it required a complex manufacturing process that only human biochemists understood. Without the cure, millions of Zephyrians were dying slow, suffocating deaths. Crystalline Collective faced a different problem. Their silicon-based biology depended on mineral supplements that humans had designed specifically for their unique chemistry. As the supplements ran out, crystalline children were being born with defects that made them unable to survive. Commander Tracy Adams led human reconnaissance operations from a stealth ship hidden in the dark space between galaxies. Her job was to monitor council space without being detected, gathering information about how badly alien civilizations were collapsing. Tracy's LATEST reports painted a picture of complete societal breakdown. The hegemony of scales had declared martial law on their home world as food riots spread through their cities. The Altarian Federation was splitting apart as individual planets refused to share their dwindling resources with other worlds. Zephyrian Empire was mobilizing what remained of their military to seize control of any functioning human technology they could find. This had led to armed conflicts with other species who were trying to do the same thing. Most shocking of all was the discovery that many of the technologies the aliens had claimed as their own inventions were actually based on human research they had stolen over the centuries. Without access to the original human science, their copies were failing in ways that created even bigger disasters. A crystalline research team trying to restart a human-designed terraforming system had accidentally poisoned the atmosphere of an entire planet. The aliens had followed the procedures they had been taught, but they did not understand the chemical reactions involved. The planet was now uninhabitable and would remain that way for thousands of years. Altarian engineers attempting to repair a human-built space elevator had caused it to collapse, destroying the orbital station it was connected to and killing everyone aboard. They had tried to replace human-made materials with alien alternatives without understanding why humans had chosen those specific materials. Back on New Haven, President Maria Santos met with her cabinet to discuss the situation. In their former galaxy, the reports coming in showed that the collapse was total and irreversible. Some of the council species are sending scout fleets to search for us, Admiral Cooper reported. They are looking in all the wrong places. They assume we moved to another part of their galaxy instead of leaving it entirely. Let them search. Maria replied, they will find nothing but empty space. We planned this evacuation for decades. We made sure there would be no trail for them to follow. Colonel Brooks added, our intelligence networks report that several council species are close to complete societal collapse. The Traders' Union has already broken up into competing factions. The Peaceful Communion has abandoned most of their territory and retreated to their core worlds. Maria looked out at the bustling human cities below. They had everything they needed for a successful galactic civilization. All they had to do was treat us as equals instead of servants. Their pride cost them everything. As the meeting ended, Maria reflected on how different things could have been. If the Council had accepted humans as true partners, both sides could have built something amazing together. Instead, alien arrogance had created a disaster that would take centuries to recover from. If recovery was even possible, the galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the consequences of taking others for granted. 1 year after humanity disappeared from the galaxy, Director Paul Miller sat in his command center on New Haven, watching the final collapse of galactic civilization. The screens around him showed a galaxy in chaos. Over 300 worlds were now dealing with complete infrastructure failure. Billions of aliens faced starvation, disease, and war. Paul had been humanity's chief coordinator during the Exodus. His job was to make sure every human made it safely to their new homes, while leaving behind a galaxy that could no longer function without them. The plan had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. The latest intelligence reports painted a picture of civilizations falling back into primitive conditions. The hegemony of Scales had lost their entire outer rim territory to pirate gangs who used crude weapons and stolen ships. Without functional defense networks, the snake-like aliens could not protect their colonies from raiders who took whatever they wanted. The Crystalline Collective's trade empire had crumbled completely. Their cargo ships sat dead in space, unable to navigate between star systems without human-designed computers. The rock-like aliens, who had once controlled commerce across dozens of sectors, were now reduced to local barter systems on their home worlds. Commander Tracy Adams continued her reconnaissance missions from the hidden monitoring station at the edge of Council space. Her stealth ship moved silently through the darkness, observing the chaos without being detected. What she saw would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. Ancient enemies were forming desperate alliances, trying to pool their failing resources. The Zephyrian Empire and the Altarian Federation, who had fought 3 wars in the past century, were now begging each other for help. Neither had enough working technology to survive alone, but together they might last a few more months. Some species had begun abandoning their weaker colonies entirely, pulling back to defend only their most important worlds. The Peaceful Communion, who had once preached unity across the galaxy, had retreated to their home system and refused to help anyone else. Their philosophy of cooperation had died when cooperation became too expensive. Tracy watched a Crystalline convoy trying to evacuate a mining world that had lost all power. The massive aliens moved slowly in their environmental suits, loading what they could carry onto ships that barely functioned. They left behind cities that had housed millions, returning them to the empty rock they had been before humans taught the galaxy how to transform dead worlds into living ones. The most devastating change was happening on the former capital world of Nexus Prime. The planet that had once hosted representatives from across the galaxy was now nearly empty. The Galactic Council still met, but only 12 species could afford to send ambassadors. The great chamber that had once buzzed with debate and diplomacy now echoed with desperate arguments about which worlds to abandon next. Dr. Nancy White received daily reports about the medical catastrophe spreading through alien space. The plague affecting the Zephyrian Empire had mutated into 3 different strains, each deadlier than the last. With no human biochemists to develop new treatments, the insect-like aliens were dying by the millions. The crystalline birth defects had become so severe that their species faced extinction within a generation. Their children could no longer process the minerals they needed to survive. The few crystalline scientists who understood biology were desperately trying to recreate the human supplements, but they lacked the knowledge to understand how the complex molecules actually worked. Nancy felt a moment of sadness for the suffering aliens, but she reminded herself that this crisis was entirely their own making. For decades, human medical researchers had begged the Council to let them train alien doctors in human techniques. The council had refused, saying that alien medicine was sufficient and that humans should not interfere in other species' biology. Now, those same aliens were dying from problems that any human medical student could have solved. On the military front, Admiral Jennifer Walsh commanded humanity's expanded fleet from the safety of their new galaxy. Her ships incorporated technologies that made their old vessels look like toys. Humans were no longer restricted by council regulations that limited their research and development. Jennifer's intelligence officers reported that several council species were sending scout fleets to search for any trace of humanity. The Zephyrians had launched their largest exploration mission in history, sending ships to every star system within 500 light-years of known human space. The aliens found nothing. Human colonies that had existed for centuries showed no signs of ever being inhabited. The terraforming equipment had been removed, the buildings had been demolished, and even the soil had been treated to remove traces of human agriculture. It was as if humans had never existed in those systems at all. Some alien search teams found mysterious artifacts buried on former human worlds. When they tried to examine these objects, they discovered they were sophisticated traps designed to destroy anyone who tampered with them. The humans had left these devices as a warning that they did not want to be followed. The economic collapse reached its final stage when the Central Banking Consortium admitted they could no longer process interstellar currency transactions. The computer systems that had managed galactic finance for thousands of years were built on algorithms that only humans understood. Without the ability to transfer money between worlds, interstellar trade stopped completely. Species that had depended on imported food faced immediate starvation. Worlds that specialized in manufacturing certain products could no longer sell them to other planets. The complex web of galactic commerce that had taken millennia to build unraveled in a matter of weeks. Director Miller watched the banking collapse with grim satisfaction. The aliens had always treated human economists like clever accountants, who were useful for managing money, but too simple to understand real economics. Human financial experts had built the systems that made galactic prosperity possible, but they had never been given credit for their innovations. Captain Alex Turner, one of humanity's youngest starship commanders, often flew patrols along the edge of their new territory. At 28 years old, Alex commanded technology that surpassed anything the Council had ever imagined. His ship could travel between galaxies in days rather than years. His weapons could destroy entire fleets without being detected. Alex had grown up hearing stories about the old galaxy where humans served alien masters. He found it hard to believe that his people had once been treated as servants. The humans he knew were explorers, scientists, and builders who created wonders wherever they went. During one patrol mission, Alex detected an alien distress signal coming from the edge of Council space. A crystalline research vessel was drifting, powerless, its crew slowly dying as their life support systems failed. Alex could have easily rescued them, but his orders were clear. Humanity no longer involved itself in alien affairs. Alex watched the alien ship disappear into the darkness and continued his patrol. He felt no satisfaction from their suffering, but he also felt no obligation to help them. The galaxy had made its choice when it decided humans were not worthy of respect. Now it would live with the consequences of that choice. Back on the Council worlds, the remaining governments were reaching the same terrible conclusion. Their entire civilization had been built on human knowledge, human innovation, and human labor. Without humans to maintain the complex systems that kept their worlds functioning, they were slowly falling back into the primitive conditions their ancestors had known thousands of years ago. Some species tried one last desperate attempt to solve their problems. They sent ambassadors to the edge of known space, broadcasting messages of surrender and apology. They offered to give humans anything they wanted in exchange for help. They promised to treat humans as equals, to share power in the council, to respect human contributions to galactic civilization. Yet the messages went unanswered. Humanity had moved beyond the reach of their former galaxy, both physically and emotionally. The aliens were welcome to fix their own problems, or fail trying. Either way, it was no longer humanity's concern. As the second year of the crisis began, Paul Miller prepared his final report on the collapse of the Galactic Council. The galaxy that had once been home to thousands of thriving civilizations was now a collection of struggling survivors clinging to whatever technology still functioned. The price of treating humans as servants instead of partners had turned out to be everything they had built together. 5 years had passed since humanity left the galaxy behind. President Carlos Martinez stood in his office on the capital world of New Terra, looking out at a city that would have amazed the aliens who had once called humans their servants. Towers of living crystal grew from the ground, powered by fusion reactors that created more energy than entire star systems had once used. Gardens floated in the air between buildings, fed by atmospheric processors that turned empty sky into fertile. Growing Space. Carlos was reading the final intelligence report from their old galaxy. The news was exactly what he had expected, but it still felt strange to read about the complete collapse of civilizations that had once ruled the stars. The Galactic Council no longer existed. The great chamber on Nexus Prime sat empty and dark, its environmental systems dead for over a year. The few alien species that still maintained interstellar travel had formed small alliances based on mutual survival rather than the grand politics of the past. The Zephyrian Empire had fallen completely. Their insect-like people now lived in scattered tribes on their homeworld, fighting over the few pieces of technology that still functioned. Without the medical treatments humans had developed for their species, most Zephyrians died before reaching adulthood. Their population was less than 1% of what it had been during the height of their empire. Admiral Jennifer Walsh commanded humanity's new fleet from the orbital shipyard above New Terra. Her vessels incorporated technologies that seemed like magic compared to what the Council had once possessed. Ships that could fold space around themselves, traveling between distant galaxies in hours. Weapons that could rearrange matter at the atomic level, turning asteroids into gardens or enemies into harmless gas. Jennifer often thought about the irony of their situation. The aliens had restricted human technological development for centuries, claiming that humans were too violent and primitive to be trusted with advanced science. Now humanity had surpassed anything the Council had ever imagined, while the aliens themselves had fallen back into barbarism. The latest scout reports showed that some alien worlds had regressed to pre-industrial conditions. The Crystalline Collective, who had once commanded vast mining operations across dozens of star systems, now used simple hand tools to dig minerals from their home world. Their children grew up never knowing that their ancestors had once traveled between the stars. Captain Alex Turner piloted his exploration ship through the rings of a gas giant in the Triangulum Galaxy. At 33 years old, Alex had spent his entire adult life exploring the new territories humanity was claiming. His ship discovered 3 new habitable worlds every month, each one transformed into a paradise by human terraforming technology that worked faster and better than anything the old galaxy had ever seen. Alex remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about serving in the Council military. Human soldiers had fought and died for alien causes, protecting species that barely acknowledged their sacrifice. Human engineers had built the weapons and defenses that kept the Council safe, only to be told they were too dangerous to hold command. Positions in the armies they equipped. Now humanity commanded fleets that could have conquered the entire Council space in a matter of days. They chose not to because they had no interest in ruling over the ruins of dead civilizations. Dr. Sam Rodriguez led the Human Scientific Council from the research city of Einstein Prime. a massive space station that orbited twin neutron stars. The energy output from the stars powered experiments that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. Human scientists were unlocking secrets of the universe that the Council's greatest minds had never even imagined existed. Sam received occasional reports about alien attempts to rebuild their technology. The results were still catastrophic. A group of Altarian scientists had tried to create a new communication network using principles they barely understood. Their experiment had torn a hole in space-time that swallowed their entire star system. Along with billions of innocent people, the few alien civilizations that still functioned had learned to fear any attempt at advanced technology. They lived simple lives on single worlds, afraid to reach for the stars again because they knew they lacked the knowledge to do it safely. On the colony world of New Eden, Dr. Nancy White worked in her medical research facility developing treatments for diseases that affected the enhanced human physiology. Humans had been forced to adapt to life in space during their centuries of service to the Council. That adaptation had unlocked genetic potential that made them stronger, smarter, and longer lived than their ancestors. Nancy also monitored the medical reports coming from their old galaxy. The plagues that had started during the first year of collapse were still spreading. Entire species faced extinction because they had never learned to create the medicines that kept them healthy. The few alien doctors who remained alive were reduced to using primitive treatments that barely helped their dying patients. The hegemony of scales had been completely wiped out by a virus that attacked their nervous systems. The snake-like aliens had depended entirely on human-developed vaccines to protect them from this disease. When the vaccines ran out, and no one knew how to make more, the entire species died within 6 months. Commander Tracy Adams still ran intelligence operations from her hidden monitoring stations, but her job had become almost unnecessary. There was so little left of galactic civilization that there was almost nothing worth watching. Tracy's final report described a galaxy where darkness was spreading as star systems lost power and fell silent. Pirates and scavengers picked through the ruins of once great cities, fighting over scraps of technology they could not understand or repair. Some worlds had been completely abandoned, their populations either dead or scattered to other systems where they lived as refugees. The most bitter irony was that many of the alien species were now trying to recreate the very technologies they had once forbidden humans from developing. Zephyrian military leaders searched desperately through old records, looking for the weapons designs that human engineers had created for them. They found the blueprints, but without understanding the science behind them, their attempts to build new weapons only resulted in explosions that killed their own people. President Martinez called a meeting of the human leadership to discuss their future. The Great Council Chamber on New Terra was filled with leaders who had built a civilization that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. They controlled hundreds of worlds across 3 different galaxies. Their technology could reshape reality itself. Their people lived lives of abundance and discovery that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. We have received over 10,000 messages from the old galaxy in the past year, Martinez announced to the assembled leaders. They are all the same. Desperate pleas for help, offers of complete surrender, promises to treat us as equals if we will only return. Admiral Walsh spoke first. The time for those promises was 5 years ago, before they drove us away. They had centuries to treat us with respect, and they chose exploitation instead. Dr. Rodriguez added, "Our analysis shows that even if we wanted to help them, it would be impossible. Their civilizations have collapsed too completely. We would have to rebuild everything from scratch, and it would take centuries to restore what they destroyed through their ignorance." Colonel Brooks, now head of human security, reported on the military situation. Some alien factions are still trying to find us. They have launched scout fleets toward nearby galaxies, But they are, using technology so primitive that they will never reach us. Most of their ships break down before they leave their own star systems. Martinez looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. These were people who had been born in alien space, who had grown up serving alien masters, who had been told their entire lives that humans were too young and violent to govern themselves. Now they ruled a civilization that made their former oppressors look like children playing with broken toys. The question before us is simple, Martinez said. Do we have any obligation to help the species that enslaved us for so long? The answer was unanimous. Humanity had given the galaxy centuries of service, innovation, and sacrifice. In return, they had received only contempt and restrictions. The aliens had made their choice when they decided that humans were useful servants, but unworthy partners. They would live with the consequences of that choice, or die with them. As the meeting ended, Martinez walked to his office window and looked out at the thriving human cities below. Children who had never known alien rule played in parks that floated among the clouds. Scientists who had never been told their ideas were too dangerous conducted experiments that expanded the boundaries of known reality. Artists who had never been restricted by alien censorship created works of beauty that brought tears to the eyes of anyone who saw them. Humanity had finally found what they had always been searching for. Not just freedom from alien oppression, but the chance to discover what they could become when they were truly free to be themselves. A galaxy they had left behind could keep its darkness and its ruins. Humanity was building something better among the stars.